Reviews are starting to pour in for The Exorcist Believer. Is it a worthy sequel to Believe In? Or is it yet another installment that's going to make us vomit pea soup all over the nearest priest? 50 years ago, The Exorcist changed horror as we know it. Director William Friedkin's 1973 film was far from the first great entry in the genre, but it brought an almost documentary-like sense of realism to its story of a young girl who catches a really bad case of demonic possession.
How long are you planning to stay in Reagan?
Until she rots and lies stinking in the earth.
The outcome was one of the most exalted horror films of all time, and one that would inspire enough bad imitators to make your head spin like a possessed Reagan McNeil. The latest attempt at matching Friedkin's achievement comes from David Gordon Green, a former indie wonderkind who knows a thing or two about tackling sacred horror properties after helming Blumhouse's Halloween trilogy.
Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
Titled The Exorcist Believer, the film reunites Green and Blumhouse for a story about two girls who begin showing surefire signs of being controlled by a nasty entity after going missing in the woods for a few days. Like Green's Halloween, this one is a legacy sequel that sees original Exorcist star Ellen Burstyn reprising her role as Chris McNeil, who tries to help the kids in crisis, being that she's one of the few living people with experience in these matters.
We've met before.
Mother.
As you may recall, the finale of Green's Halloween trilogy, Halloween Ends, proved to be one of the more divisive horror films in recent memory. Turns out, some folks are already pointing out that the same thing is going to happen with Believer. However, where critics were increasingly divided on Green's Halloween trilogy the further along it went, they're comparatively unified in their disdain for Believer so far. At the time of this video, the film has a critic score of only 25% on Rotten Tomatoes after 64 reviews. Upon seeing the film, Slash Film's own Whitney Seibold wrote, "The Exorcist Believer is as haphazard, uninteresting, and frustratingly shallow as any of the many Exorcist imitators. Green, free to narratively link his film directly to Friedkin's, only churned out another generic knockoff. It's the least interesting Exorcist film to date." Echoing that sentiment, Mashable acknowledged the original Exorcist is a tough act to follow in their review, but felt that Green's sequel nevertheless commits the cardinal sin of simply being boring. Critic Bellin Edwards explained, "Limited scares, underdeveloped characters, and a hackneyed message about unity will make you yearn for escape, even as the movie tees up for a sequel." Indeed, where you could readily find critics eager and willing to defend Green's Halloween sequels, even some of the more positive reviews for Believer tend to come with a big ol' asterisk. For example, The Guardian observed that it's easier to appreciate the film as a fun schlockfest rather than a continuation of Friedkin's classic. Critic Benjamin Lee wrote, "Taken as just that, it's serviceable. A silly, gloopy Halloween shocker that offers just about enough goofy entertainment for an undemanding Fright Night crowd."
The body in the blood! The body in the blood! The body in the blood!
General horror enthusiasts have also started weighing in on Believer after preview screenings. One blogger wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, "Exorcist Believer is way too predictable and very much on the corny side. Was not a fan in the least. Great cast. The kids especially were terrific and really nailed their roles. Leslie Odom Jr. was fantastic as the lead as well." On the opposite end of the spectrum, another X user wrote, "I shockingly liked The Exorcist Believer as a film, and it's David Gordon Green's most mature character study since George Washington in 2000. But it's barely a horror film." Meanwhile, YouTuber Sydney Volpe indicated that your reaction to Green's Halloween trilogy may be a good litmus test for how you'll feel about Believer. She wrote, "The Exorcist Believer is exactly what one would expect from a David Gordon Green Exorcist movie. Take that as you will. As a Halloween Ends defender, I didn't hate it. As an Exorcist lover, it just doesn't stack up, despite trying some new things. Demons are too nice these days."
I don't want to go to hell!
In summation, folks don't seem quite as split on Green's Exorcist movie so far as they were on his Halloween trilogy. That could easily change once more people have seen it. But for now, it appears you could say this is one legacy horror sequel that has failed to make a believer out of the masses.